Today, we are excited to welcome Myesha Watkins, the inaugural administrator of the Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention. Prior stepping into this role at the county, she served as the executive director of the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, where she led outreach teams working in neighborhoods, hospitals, and schools to interrupt violence, mediate conflicts, and mentor young people at highest risk. She brings a wealth of experience in violence intervention, youth development, and trauma informed care. Over the past decade, Myesha has become a trusted voice in the field of public safety reform, building coalitions, strengthening engagement, and helping shape national conversations about violence as a public health issue. And in 2022, she was invited to the White House and recognized for her work in violence prevention. She is active in her community, serving on the boards of Fostering Hope and Girls Advancing with Purpose. She is also a member of the Youth Mental Health Advisory Committee for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Northeast Ohio. And we are proud to have her as a graduate of the Leadership Cleveland class of 2025 and a past Accelerate finalist. Please welcome Myesha.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch hour with me. I know how important it is to have a good meal during your workday, so I'm really, really grateful. Rachel, thank you for the amazing introduction. I'm always shocked when people read about me, and I'm not always shy, but I'm very bashful when I hear about the things that I've been blessed to be able to do in our city and across the country. Again, my name is Myesha Watkins. I am the administrator for Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention. And before I share my screen, I just want to say to anybody that have been impacted by the disease of violence, I want to send my condolences to you all. Gun violence prevention is not just a career for me, but I have lost 3 cousins to gun violence in the city of Cleveland. So very personal to this work, understanding why I do it. Also, as a mother, wanted to ensure that my children, as well as anyone else on this call who is a parent or a mentor or any other capacity, that all of our children, our loved ones, are able to grow up in a county that is free and safe from the disease of gun violence. So I'll share my screen, and then we can get right into the conversation. Rachel, is the screen okay? Perfect. So today, actually, this month on the 22nd will be 1 year since our county exec, Chris Ronayne, established this office. Um, and the crazy part, like Rachel mentioned, is that I worked in a community for Cleveland, for an organization called Cleveland Peacemakers. And I had the opportunity to participate at the University of Chicago Community Violence Intervention Leadership Academy. And in this program, I dreamt up this office. It was then called the Crisis Management System. And because a lot of my work was focused in the city of Cleveland, I once was a community member asking, what are we doing to address gun violence as a county? I do know that more lives are impacted by the disease of gun violence in the city of Cleveland, but we should also be able to support our neighboring cities who are also impacted by the disease of violence. And what does that coordination looks like? So really grateful for our county exec for seeing a need and creating a solution to be able to be one of many people who are addressing the disease of violence in our county. And one of the most important components is that not this office alone would be able to address the magnitude of violence that we see in any city, in our county, our state, or our country, but all of us, including you all who are on this call, would be a part of the solution. So our mission is the Office of Violence Prevention is committed to taking a public health approach to end violence by addressing its root causes, including poverty, trauma, and lack of opportunity. And to make this more plain outside of the words is that if you all remember when we had the huge epidemic with fatal car accidents, and everyone thought that if we address this from a public health approach, ensuring that everybody can be safe while driving, then we can reduce the chances of people losing their lives in car accidents. Same mindset from a public health approach. How do we call everybody into something that is impacting all or most of us and create a solution where everybody can be a part of it? And so when you talk about gun violence or violence being viewed as a public health approach, talking about it in a way of a disease, people are more compelled to figure out a solution to address that. And there are so many simple ways that we can look at violence prevention from a public health approach. One being partnering with the public health department. Cuyahoga County has an amazing public health department that has really partnered with the Office of Violence Prevention since we've been a part of it. But making sure that people understands the root causes of violence. When you talk about poverty and you look at a city like Cleveland and having one of the highest stats for childhood poverty for a city our size in this country, is really important to understand the mindset of individuals who live in those communities. Outside of being in this role, I also grew up in the city of Cleveland, graduated, proud graduate from CMSD schools, and navigated a lot of the risk factors that people in our community are still navigating. So, really being able to understand, in addition to the mindset and the challenges that put people at risk of either choosing or being impacted by violence, how can we systemically be able to help address the social drivers or determinants of health that most communities that are impoverished are facing? So it's really important that this office look at those things so that we'll be able to connect the dots as to why people are choosing or certain communities being more impacted by the disease of violence. Our core pillars are coordinated violence prevention support, collaboration and coordination, and community engagement. And so I'll just talk a little bit more about these three. When you think about a coordinated violence prevention support strategy, you think about community members who are impacted by the disease of violence in their community. And how do we work with organizations like the Friendly End, the Boys and Girls Club, the People's Office, New Era Cleveland, and CMSD School District, and really try to figure out how to get the resources to the people that needs the most. One of the things that I always hear is that Cuyahoga County is one of the most well-resourced counties in the country. And so there's no shortage of people having a passion, creating a solution. It's just how do we coordinate it in a way that we get the resources to the people and not just create a resource because there's a problem. And so this office will be able to coordinate internally with our departments and offices, as well as externally with different systems and community-based organizations to ensure that the violence prevention strategy is in place to be able to support families and residents. Collaboration and coordination are is kind of the same. And so one of the things that this office will do is be able to convene county departments and offices, community-based organizations, systems, nonprofit, the great work that Leadership Cleveland does to be able to tap into that partnership to figure out how do we all understand how violence impacts all of us and not just some of us. I know some communities are more directly impacted by violence than others, but one of the things that I always like to do to call people in is that as taxpayers, we're all paying for the disease of violence. One homicide is $1 million and one non-fatal shooting is 1.5 million. And so although our communities are safe from this said disease of violence, we're still paying for it. And so how do we be preventive instead of responding to and paying for people dying or being shot? To see it as an investment, that if we save one life through this collaboration approach, that a return on investment, not just in lives being saved, but in us not just reacting and responding to and paying for people dying in our county. Community engagement is a huge part. Having been in community for many, many years, you can't do anything at a government level without censoring and listening to community members. And having been a community member, I once was in a position where I was like, what is government doing? What are these systems doing? And part of my heart is still there. And now because I'm inside of this department, it's really important for me to understand how I once felt and be able to give that information to organizations who still believe the way that I do and be able to walk them through the process on what does it look like, and also being able to share data. In my previous position, it was really hard to figure out non-fatal shootings or even how many homicides that we had, and not to just focus on the blood measures, but like what are the positive things that are prolonging life and how do we share those data metrics as well. And so one of the things that will come from this office, again, partnering with Leadership Cleveland, having been on a few conversations with them, it's like, how do we track this ecosystem? how do we create this data sharing platform so that if Maya, she's on this call, if Maya wants to know what does violence look like in her community, she'll be able to go to this OVP dashboard and say, wow, violence is down by 75% in my community. And these are the things that are aiding to that reduction. And so really to not just be a platform or a data platform that my colleagues can understand, but that residents will be able to read and understand and be able to hold people accountable to say, these are things that shows improvement in our community. How about we do more of these things? And I want the data to be able to empower community members to do just that. Sorry, you guys. So the next part is our countywide violence prevention listen and learn tour. And I know the dates to the right are dates that have already passed. So I'm really happy to share that we were able to successfully schedule and complete all 5 of our countywide prevention tour dates in Parma and Garfield Heights and Euclid, East Cleveland, and Shaker. However, I think the cool part to note about this is that we partner with our county council members in those districts to ensure that representation from all the cities that's in that district had a voice. One of the things that I wanted to be clear about with this is not to assume what violence looked like in Parma. I know that violence in Parma will look a lot different than that in Cleveland. And when you start anything new, to come in assuming is the fastest way to not be liked by people. And I did not want to upset the mayors and managers in Cuyahoga County to assume. So we had these sessions, we listened, and I learned a whole lot about cities that I've never lived in, but now have the opportunity to work alongside to create a violence prevention strategy. And so it's been really, really great to complete these listen and learn tours. We have 6 more to schedule. And if anybody on this call would like to come, it's not a town hall, it's more an opportunity to listen from mayors and judges and community members and coaches and young people about what violence looks like, what resources are needed from a county level, what strategies are working so that if something's working well in Euclid, can we create a blueprint to allow Garfield Heights to tailor it to their city? Just really working smarter. Although we are different cities, we're one county, and anything that impacts any municipality impacts our county, and really want to be proactive in the way of working alongside the leadership there. This is all I have as a presentation, but I am open to answering questions and digging more into it. I think one of the things that I will say is that the Office of Violence Prevention is an office of one, but I've had the great pleasure with another Leadership Cleveland graduate, Kevin Clayton, to have 2 interns under the Office of Violence Prevention, where they partner with the MBA for the Social Justice Coalition, and had 2 young people who were impacted by the justice system to serve at the Office of Violence Prevention for 8 weeks, 8 weeks at the CAVS, and continue on the process with the MBA. But they did amazing work here. And I also had another intern who was a survivor of gun violence, Michaela. She was shot in her head in the city of East Cleveland while driving to work, and she was here for 6 months, and that was amazing. And through the partnership with the Cleveland Foundation, I'll have a fellow in August for a whole year. So know that I have support. However, if anybody wants to be able to volunteer their time or their talents, the office is open to that, because I know that there's a lot of value on this Zoom call. But that's all that I have right now. And if Rachel, you want to go into your portion, I'm more than ready to answer questions.
Great, Myesha, thank you so much. Over the past year, how has the response been to the office and the work that you're starting to do?
Let me stop sharing. So I think over the past year, the response have been amazing, especially going into the other cities throughout Cuyahoga County, just feeling as if violence alone was the responsibility of law enforcement. And although law enforcement plays a huge part in this, that community-based organizations, reentry departments, hospitals, schools, all of us as well shows up in the space of the public safety ecosystem to be able to support residents and mayors and anyone else who are in spaces that people frequent that are that are safe. And so a lot of excitement. I'm looking forward to celebrating a year in August of being in this role, have really big things planned for the second half of the year. But I've been this office, not I, this office has been very well received from cities and my colleagues here at the county.
And I'm very curious, as you have done these listen and learn tours, what are some of the things that you've been hearing from the community?
I think the one of the things that shocked me the most is that Cleveland has a lot of nonprofit organizations, but as you go further out into our neighboring communities, there's not a lot of community-based organizations out there where their default response is law enforcement or government administration. So how do we really empower community residents to create safety strategies, violence prevention strategies in their community? And I think the cool part is that leadership is receptive to it and open to supporting those community-based organizations or those residents. And so there's a lot of synergy between government and community members, is what we're hearing at the Listen and Learn sessions.
And if someone is interested in what you have coming up for the Listen and Learn tours, how do they sign up to learn more?
So we are on Instagram at Cuyahoga County OVP. Also on a Cuyahoga County page, they're also posting things. I have on the violence prevention website that's a pillar on our public safety and justice service page. There's a link to sign up for more information. But also, you can email me. I can give you my cell phone number, but there are so many ways to be engaged. I still sometimes move like a community member. So I'm learning government and system, but I'm very much so still very accessible to people and community. And so there's a number of ways. I will not allow anybody to not get in touch with me. So social media, phone number, email, text message, phone call, a fire signal, just let me know I'm available.
Myesha, I saw recently there was a promotion around a partnership with the library, and it was at the gun safety lock boxes. Can you talk a little bit about what that program is all about and how that partnership came to be?
Absolutely. So, State Representative Brewer, he's a huge advocate for community safety, community violence prevention, and he created this opportunity between Cleveland Public Library and the Office of Violence Prevention. I think before I continue, there was a tragedy for our county where last April there was a young person who was shot and killed in a library. And not saying that if this program was implemented there, that lives could have been saved, but also acknowledging the fact that once spaces are deemed unsafe, how do we have an opportunity to correct it? And sometimes people will take a situation and discredit the safety of an establishment, and that's untrue. And so it was really important that libraries that have always been a safe space for many people for generations and years to continue to be that. And so through this partnership, we worked with Cleveland Public Library to identify 3 libraries that were the most impacted by gun violence at or around the library. And we found that Glenville, Lorraine Branch, and Harvey Rice Branch were the 3. And working with the Academy of Medicine, State Representative Brewer, the Office of Violence Prevention, we have gun logs, storage boxes, and programs that will be held there for community residents. And the 3 programs that are offered are safe storage and safe gun handling classes, a listen and learn conversation with myself and a council person in that community, as well as wraparound services through asset mapping that exists at or around that library. So really excited to start that, hoping that it can expand throughout Cuyahoga County. I know we had another unfortunate situation in Parma where a young person had a suicide by firearm. And so being sure to ensure that safe storage is also accessible in communities outside of Cleveland.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the additional partnerships that you may have. And, a lot of your work is data driven. Who are you working with to kind of dive deep into gun violence data in the community?
So we're still building that out. really starting internally, working with our medical examiner will be an amazing partner, working with our sheriff's department, of course, the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, Cleveland Department of Health, really figuring out how do we work closely with the many law enforcement partners that we have throughout Cuyahoga County in addition to our court system, but most importantly, working with our community-based organizations who are the most proximate to people and the pain to figure out what does it look like before it even touch any of the other systems that I named. So centering community in a very proactive way so that we can hear honestly what is causing the violence, but then working with the partners that I shared earlier, because those touch points have already been made. And how do we share data in a way, again, to empower community residents to know what's going on, not to drive fear, but to create a narrative that this is happening, not even create a narrative. I'm sorry for using that language, but sharing the reality of what's going on in their community. And then how do we address it collectively through assets that are already there, or figuring out how to create more or collaborate with other organizations to be able to create safety in those communities.
We've had a couple of recommendations in the chat about some potential community partners that might be able to help expand some of that data access. So I will be sure to share those with you afterwards.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
You mentioned the experience at Parma, and there's a question around how school systems are being engaged, and are there any school-based efforts happening?
So, two-part. In my previous role at Cleveland Peacemakers, there was an initiative called Safe Passage, which is a national program that works with school systems to create safe routes at arrival and dismissal, to help mediate any conflicts that may happen. And that's a successful violence prevention strategy that should be considered countywide. Um, as it relates to school systems in this office, we are doing a event with South Euclid, Lyndhurst School, Brush, a violence prevention in-service day where the Office of Violence Prevention will have breakout sessions for students to come during their lunch period to talk about what are their solutions to violence prevention, what are ways young people can be the most engaged, how to create safe summers or safe seasons in general, but really going to where the young people are. We do know that violence oftentimes happen in community and spill over to classrooms, and so like how do we create that community aspect and understanding the things that they go through with hopes that it does not end up in a classroom to create a distraction from the main purpose, and having 100% graduation rate of all young people, more graduations and less touch points with our justice system and or death.
Now, for the office, is the primary focus gun violence, or are you looking broadly at how violence is defined?
So I, the office is called the Office of Violence Prevention. However, following data is really important to figure out what our charge will be. The number one cause of premature death for all kids and teens in our country is gun violence, and that's the same for Cuyahoga County. However, we understand that there's some complexities to gun violence, like gun violence by suicide, or gun violence by domestic violence, and all of these other forms of violence that are connected, or that life is altered by the use of a firearm. And so being able to collaborate and coordinate with offices that focuses on other forms of violence while we have this charge of gun violence, but overall looking at how all of it is intertwined and what's the through line, to be able to say we have a young person who is suicidal, they may have access to a firearm, what resources may need to be put in place, like safe storage, as one option, but also connecting to a community partner like Frontline, or any other organizations, Legacies Empowered, that really help with the mindset of an adult or a child who may be suicidal or who have thoughts, and how do we create some future planning if that stage is still possible. But it will be great coordination and collaboration to ensure that life is not lost at the hands of firearm by addressing the underlying issue that is connected to.
So let's look back Over this past year, building something new, what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way?
Whew. How much time do we have? I'm joking. I think some lessons learned is government is a lot different than community. And a lot of my experience have been rooted in community. And in community, one of the things that I was really great at is feeling like I had to do everything by myself. But the county is such a huge system that there's literally a person for everything, like somebody to write, make a flyer or contact the media. And I used to do all of those things. So really getting out of the mindset of like, I have to do it all because I do not. And the hustle and bustle was attached to my work ethic and community. And so sometimes I can feel like, well, what am I doing if I don't have to send this email myself? And so I think that's a challenge. Also understanding that there's a process within a system that is put in place for a reason. And understanding how that system works. So learning the government system probably has been one of my greatest challenges, and not because there's lack of support. There's so much support here. It's just I have to unlearn the nonprofit hustle and bustle that I have to do it by myself. And also, even though work is connected, like there are so many offices that do things already. So being sure to reach out to offices and directors who are charged with reentry to say, wow, I've heard this. Is there an opportunity to connect instead of saying, I can do all things because I did all things at one point of time? And so I think it's just like a mindset shift that I'm growing through, and I have so much support in getting there. Um, so I think like that's one of the things. Also, like how fast or slow things move. Is something that I'm growing through as well. But what I do appreciate is that I work better with support. So learning how to be supported feels amazing, actually. So grateful for the county and developing that space.
Myesha, that is a huge leadership lesson around actually being able to ask for and take support. So kudos to you for leaning into that.
Thank you.
So let's look ahead. What's the vision for year two and beyond?
Year two. Beyond, I hope that I get worked out of this office because we have no people in Cuyahoga County dying at the disease of any form of violence. So I hope to be unemployed soon because the work is just working so well, and we don't need the coordination anymore. But I think year two, what I'm hoping is that we have a strategic plan in place to be able to inform stakeholders, community members, and work this office alongside of them. This office is aware that we work for the people, so the people should be informed and included in a strategy to be able to hold this office accountable for the things that we will do and that we said that will happen. Also, to have a dashboard. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with what Baltimore is doing, but Mayor Scott, Brandon Scott, does amazing work around violence prevention and has a historic low in homicides there. But they have this data accountability board where community members are able to see exactly what's going on within government and how they're working with community-based organizations and partner to really reduce and eradicate the disease of any violence. So really hoping to have that in place, so the people can hold this office accountable for the things that we will do. Hoping to have staff. One of the things in nonprofit is that you're used to being a team of one, but I would like to have team members, and I see that happening soon with interns or paid staff, however that will happen. But really hoping that mayors and managers throughout Cuyahoga County really feel supported through violence prevention strategies and be able to call us in to help either build out or support what they're already doing, but to be looked at as a resource. Because a big part of this role, our county exec wanted it to be communal. So I'm always in community, which I feel good because I'm from community, but always out in community to support and be able to get a better and to educate community members to have a better understanding of what this office is and what we will do.
So, Myesha, time for one quick last question. You work in some heavy spaces. What is something that brings you joy?
Something that brings me joy, and this is not cliche because Mother's Day is on Sunday, but my children really bring me joy when they're not giving me a headache, and I'm grateful for both feelings. And I think outside of that, what brings me joy is just seeing young people being able to be young people in community spaces. I think that brings me to a lot of joy because there's a lot of headlines that are talking negatively about young people, but we have more young people who are living and thriving and doing so many amazing things. And when I see them in public spaces or on TV and graduating in prom season, it's just warming my heart. I just love to see the joy of young people. And so that brings me a lot of joy. So thank you for asking that question.
Well, Myesha, thank you for the work that you are doing to help build a safer community in Cuyahoga County. And we look forward to all the work that's to come out of your office.
Thank you so much.